I'm Anoop Shekar. I'm Volition. I've been there about 14 years now, and I've done everything from QA, production, design. My current role is the studio design manager.
Well, my name is Rob Howard. I'm currently at Human Head Studios. I'm a level scripter there. I was at Vicious Cycle in Raleigh, North Carolina before that as a level designer.
Hi, I'm Brian Pelletier. I've been with Raven Software for 18 years, and while I was there, I'm no longer there. But while I was there in the early days, and just from your perspective, I hired probably about 40 people over the course of like 18 years there. Looked at hundreds and thousands of resumes and interviews. I can talk about that a little bit, get questions on that. Otherwise, during that role, I was an art director, game director, artist, game designer, a little bit of everything. Well, and currently I'm at this place called Games Learning Society, where we make games to research how learning is done from games. So it's a lot of research based stuff.
I am Anupam. I'm a technical director at Industrial Lights and Magic in San Francisco. Previously, I worked with this guy at Raven Software, and I was at EA in Los Angeles, and I guess technically being part of Raven, I'm also part of Activision. I've also worked equally in the same capacity in visual effects. So I worked at a boutique shop in California called Asylum, and set now at the Industrial Lights and Magic. So if you have any questions regarding portfolio stuff, or just what you specialize in, like if you're a software engineering guy or an artist guy, or confused which one to go to, that's kind of like the struggle that I've definitely gone through throughout my life, like trying to figure out what I actually want to do. And I was at UWM as well, in the Department of Business.
Outstanding. Thanks for coming today. So, what we'll do is I'll start on the end and we'll work our way down. The first question that they would like me to ask is, what is something missing from new hires?
Yeah, so I also look at a lot of resumes. I do all the hiring of all the designers and Volition. And definitely one of the things I don't see as often, I see a lot of technical skill, which is great work, but oftentimes I see a lack of critical thinking and big picture analysis of understanding why you're bringing this to the game, what do you care about if you're building your game. A lot of people are just looking at cool stuff that they've seen at the time, like, oh, I want to make a game that's like that. And really, what you need to be thinking about is, what is the best use of my talents for the kind of game that I'm hired for or building.
Yeah, my position is a little bit different than some of the other folks on the panel, in that I am not a hiring manager. I'm a content producer as a level designer and now a level scripter, but I still get asked quite a bit from people. I usually get a handful of emails from perfect strangers per year asking, how to get into the industry. And of course, I know why I got hired at various places after talking with folks. So to answer the question, I would say for level design, what a lot of people do that they shouldn't do is they just put on their portfolio they might just put a few pictures and maybe a link to download something. And I don't think sometimes there's an understanding of when someone is looking through these things, there's not a lot of time to download a level and actually download the game that the level is for. If it's something for free, or use for, which a lot of people use for single player level design mods and so forth. Videos. People should use more videos. That's often advice I give to people. Videos are great because you can show them exactly what you want. They're probably not going to see any bugs, or at least they shouldn't in a video because you're controlling that, right? And everyone has time to watch a 2-minute video.
All right, so for me, there's I think two things right off the top of my head. So one is consistency. So that's something, you know, again, this is kind of from a art perspective, even animation's perspective, when I hired animators as well, is the portfolio will have what I call the diamond in the rough piece, which is like really awesome. And then there'll be maybe like 5 pieces that just are so great. So then you have to basically look at it as that one piece was basically like a fluke. The person would either had really great reference to go from, or really great feedback and criticism. They were able to get that piece to a really good state where it looks professional. The other stuff just isn't professional. So really, really judge yourself against like art that's out there. Again, from an art perspective, judge yourself, you know, with you know, people who are already in the industry. You can go to like conceptart.org. You can go to different other sites that are, you know, people are posting what they're working on, and really compare yourself to that. Other people around you that are, you know, trying to get jobs. So consistency is a big thing. Another thing, and you know, it sounds odd as somebody breaking in, but it's experience. And you can get this in a number of ways. So like even like when you're working, like say if you're in a school situation and you're working on a project-based game that you're all working together on, that's to me like team experience. So I want to know, say in that resume, or even when I'm talking on the phone or in person, like what was your experience like working with the people on the project? How did you like, you know, what difficulties did you have during your production? How as a team did you collaborate to get through and find success? So think about your sort of like project-based situations and how that is the experience of working with the team. Because when you're hired at a studio, you're not a single guy that you kind of shove off in the corner and say, go make work. You're going to be, you know, working with even if it's 3 people, or in my case, 60 people on a team. You're always working with somebody. So that I want to know that, kind of like right off the bat, what your experience is. Even with your teachers, that's another big thing. Teachers, for me, like I was an art director, so I had to art direct with people. And teachers are basically your directors, you know, so I want to know how you interacted with your teachers. So all those interactions you're having are big things that you need to kind of think about and kind of put those in your resume as experience.
It's all really nice. I should one thing without repeating what they said, I think the biggest thing for me from a student standpoint, and even from someone who has 10 years of experience, is show your process. I think a lot of people, even if they have really great polished work, you got to realize that, you know, as a professional, there's a lot of people that have probably put their hand on that environment, or that character, or that gameplay piece. You know, indicate what you did, what your contribution was. Because a lot of times you may have done like 90% of that level, and even if that level is like not the most amazing level in the world, you did like a lot of that. That's a huge thing. And you know, how you show your process is kind of up to you. Like I personally prefer like a website or a blog where, you know, you show like, here's the end result, here's how I got there, here's a couple of screenshots of like here's like a top-down map of the level, or you know, here's how I figured out how AI navigates through the level, or I came up with this really cool new shader that like makes this super fast, whatever it might be. Definitely show your process. That's a big thing. And that really impresses a lot of recruiters, and ultimately it impresses when you get through the recruiting part of it. Really, your portfolio is reviewed by who will be your potential peers, people who you're going to be working with. So they actually know what they're doing. And so like you have to realize that you're showing your stuff to people who really know what they're doing. They're not just like, you know, a recruiter who doesn't really understand the technical parts of what you're doing. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think I mentioned already is just, you know, pick your best work and put that first. And then the third thing is, if you're going to make some kind of video or website or whatever, you know, try to stay a little calmer on the music. I think a lot of people like to put, like, I love dubstep, like anybody else, but like, you know, tone down the dubstep, or if you're gonna, you know, use music and stuff, if you're an artist, for example, you know, pick something. It's going to be part of your ability to make an artistic composition if you make music. So pick a track that like has to do with whatever you're showing, you know. So if it's Lord of the Rings, maybe it's crazy. That makes sound good. I don't know. Or just don't do music at all. One of the two. If you don't want to go down that route, just don't.
Sorry, I had one more thing I wanted to add also. I'll play the games of the places you're interviewing at, because you would be surprised at how many people have not played a Volition game when they apply. When I ask them questions about it, it really, to me, is, I don't know, ultimately I don't really care, but it shows me how much you care about us.
Excellent, thank you. Second question. Should I be a generalist or focus on one thing?
I guess it depends, on the type of role you're going for. Design can be probably more of a generalist, but even now it's way more specialized. Basically, it's a level scripter. It requires a lot of specialized knowledge for that kind of role. But you have to have an understanding of how it fits in the big picture of everything you're doing. So what I would do is say, pick something that you're really interested in and focus on that, but understand how it works and do work in other areas just so you get a sense of how it all fits together.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've personally struggled with this because when I was in school, I went to SMU Guildhall actually. I was always told by the professors there, you have to be, the way to succeed is to pick this one small thing and be better than everyone in the world at that, one small thing. And I kind of got my first job at Vicious Cycle by having a broad range of skills actually. And that's definitely what carried me through. But then I got hired at Human Head because I was able to display one particular skill that they liked. And so I've kind of been going around in circles, but I think the best advice I've seen for this is actually something I saw on LinkedIn a few days ago, where they talked about being like Mr. T. And what they meant is being like a T. At the center, you have one or two core skills. And then the T part is all these other skills that complement. And so I think you can have some specializations, things that you really focus on, that you're really good at. But you can also have complementary skills. I think the nice thing about complementary skills, and as a designer, that lends itself to this, I think, because the nice thing about complementary skills is you can learn them quickly. Going from not being able to model at all to being able to make a simple pillar, that can be accomplished quickly. And, going from nothing at all to being able to make an awesome character model is another thing entirely. So you can build up the T things while still, the parts on the T, while still having these core things that you're good at, I think.
Yes, so kind of going back to it's like kind of where you're going. So if you're going to a smaller studio, very few people, then being a generalist is a good thing. Having good general knowledge. When you're going to a big studio, where it's like, so for me, like when I was always hiring, it was literally to fill a role that I didn't already have. I don't need generalists because I've got plenty of artists who do other general things, and I might be specifically looking for this one slot that I don't have and I want to fill. So it's not even that your resume is bad, it's just that you don't fit the exact need that I have. Kind of like echoing a little bit of the, it's good to know a little bit of everything. And I think most people are kind of getting that background that I've been seeing lately, I guess over 5 years or so. There, with a lot of the schools cropping up and teaching a lot of the process of games, I find a lot more people that really know about a good depth of how to go about creating games, or the process of the ones, and that's great. And then having that sort of like one area where you're specializing, I think is a plus. And definitely show that strength off in your portfolio. I mean, again, it's like jack of all trades is great, but you want to be a jack of all trades and then at least a master of one, kind of thing.
My role as a TD, which is short for technical director, it's interesting because I think I do what I do because I was kind of a generalist and I started at really small companies. Actually, here in Milwaukee, I worked at a small video post-production company, and it was like I was the only guy that would do all the 3D renderings and work while also doing school. And it was like, I just had to do everything. But the thing is, as a TD, what I do every day is I basically take everything like, I work more on the art side of things, and whether it's movies or games, I basically take everything and I just make it look good. And that's a short way of saying lighting, shaders, sometimes animation, tools development. So there's a lot of programming, having a good eye for art, having a good eye for lighting and composition, even just digital animation. These things, there's a lot of different disciplines that kind of come together, so it's very difficult for me to really focus in on something for a long term and try to get really good at it. What I try to do is figure out what is the problem at hand on the thing that you're trying to work on. Is the thing that's really lacking is lighting? Is it shaders? Is it something else? And then try as best as you can to focus in and get better at that thing. And I think that over time you'll kind of naturally build an understanding of what you're really good at. Like for me, I think my real strength is probably lighting, even though I do a lot of other things like I'll do tool development, I'll do procedural animation, do shaders, sometimes do rigging, but really like lighting is my strength. Like if you just say go to town on this lighting, I can. But so I guess I'm trying to say being a generalist is not a bad thing, and starting at small companies will probably end up being a generalist, and then you'll have this fear or anxiety like, oh, now I want to go to a big company like EA or whatever, and what should I focus on something? I feel like my portfolio is diversified, and I would just say try to find like the one or two things within that general context that you kind of really shine at and show that. But don't put yourself down as a journalist, because these days teams are getting smaller and people want guys that can just dive in and handle different things. I will say that the exception to that I've seen in my experience has definitely been on the character side. So character development, whether it's movies or games, is a really, really hard subject to make visions or feature amazing. Game is something that you really basically a full-time focus. So that is an area where I've seen fewer generalists, like a really great character artist, character modeler, or character rigger has been doing that thing for a very long time. I don't see a lot of great generalist characters.
You're not going to break in as a character or as a modeler. You're not. It's just really fun. So I did want to add.
Thank you. Next on the list, what engines or tools should I learn, and should I start from scratch?
Depends on the types of games that you're interested in breaking into, but for a design perspective, I think learning the Unreal Engine is a good place to start. The Kismet system for scripting is really good, and in fact, Volition, we're transitioning to a visual scripting system that's similar but not the same as Kismet. I think you can script in that, you're going to be in good shape. That being said, if you want to go further, definitely Lua is used in a lot of places, or some similar language that having some programming background will help, not just in terms of doing scripting, but you're interfacing with programmers and something like that. In terms of starting from scratch, I'm not sure what that means. Like, yeah,
Just stick to the engine and tools, I guess.
Yeah, I think trying to like build your own tool set or something like that would be extremely complicated and not where that was the question asking.
Yeah, I certainly second the Unreal Notion. It's kind of been one relative constant, I think, in the past 5-6 years. Is the usefulness of Unreal 3 and beyond is a tool that a lot of people look at and are familiar with. Just to even get a little more specific, especially with level design, when I talk to my friends elsewhere in the industry, people tend to like to see, like if you're doing single player stuff and you want to demonstrate your chops as like a single player level designer, probably still Gears of War is the original one, as old as that may seem now. It's basically because it has a single player AI that's pretty good kind of built in, and so you can kind of focus on the design, the level, and doing cool things with that. With UDK, you have some simple AI built in, but you'll be spending a lot of time getting that AI to do kind of the things you would expect in a single player game. If it's multiplayer, then you can use UDK, or even Unreal Tournament 3, but probably UDK now. Other than that, certainly I think Unity has probably gotten a lot more useful to know, especially for the smaller studios. Even larger studios will use Unity for smaller projects as well. It's something we've done at Human Head with Fort Courage. That was a Unity game, so that's definitely useful now. And I'll also second Lua, because I spent some time with Lua. It's a really fun scripting language, a really good way to kind of dive into a programming language that's not as difficult as C++ to get your mind around.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as engines, again, like game tech, it's like kind of like art software or something as well. It's like one does what kind of all the others does. So just diving into UDK and understanding pipelines there, procedures, you can jump over to Unity, pretty much the same kind of language being used. It's just a different way of going about getting to the end result. Same thing for like big tech or the Cry engine, or all of those are like that. I mean, and again, that's like sort of like 3D stuff. Actually, Unity does some really good 2D stuff as well. But I would, stuff like Game Maker is awesome and Scratch is awesome, and that's going to kind of just get you an understanding just the scripting at a very good basic level, and it'll allow you to kind of step up. And even actually make some really, if you're a game designer and you really kind of want to show off your game design chops, jumping into those engines or those little game makers, whatever. Yeah, jumping into those and playing around with those to actually show your game design skills as well as your good scripting skills, I think is a plus. And I do remember what I was going to say before. So, on the whole idea of like generalist versus specialist, when I brought up the whole thing of like, that sometimes a company is looking for a specific thing. So when you're trying to break in, like continue to build your portfolio, like never stop. Don't just be like, hey, oh, my portfolio is done, I finished school, now I can go and look for a job. No, just keep building skills. And you might see a position where it's like maybe you're focused, from our perspective, you're focused on like, I'm really good at like doing 2D art, but I'm okay at 3D. But then you're seeing a lot of positions out there looking for 3D artists. You're like, well, maybe I should build some 3D art skills. And then you start building that 3D portion of your portfolio. Just keep working on those skills over a few months and just build stuff. Then you can go and apply and basically tailor yourself to those specific roles. Once you have that general knowledge. So never stop building your portfolio ever.
That's really great advice. Actually, picking back on that too, like personal work is really great too. Like just like if you're out of school already and you don't have content in the class, like rather than employ, just come up with cool ideas. And sometimes personal work is also. Anyways, with the engine question, I personally prefer Unreal Engine. I've just been using it since like version 1. I used to make like Unreal Tournament mods, before going into the industry professionally. However, to be honest with you, I've used both Unreal and Unity, and I think it depends on what kind of person you are. I think if you're more someone who's more comfortable with coding, like just like scripting languages, Java, that kind of thing, Unity really offers like every object basically has a little JavaScript that pops up that controls that object. So you can just jump in and just start writing code. A lot of people are very technical. They think very technically, but they also think visually, and they don't necessarily want to be tied down with writing code or the semantics of code structure. And that's where Unreal really shines. I think in a way it was built for people who don't, this is going to sound bad, but it's built for people who don't know how to code, to do stuff that normally you need to code. So Kismet is an example where you visually just kind of tie little nodes together. And it's kind of like a mind map, right? Like, oh, do this first, and then do this, and then do this. Or the shader editor in Unreal, where instead of writing like HLSL shader code, which was like a bunch of Chinese, if you don't, if you've never done that before, it may be very intimidating. With Unreal, someone who has never written HLSL can go in there and say, oh, a texture node, oh, what does this do? And then you just like start tying things together and visually seeing the result of what you're doing when you're doing it. And I think one of the weird things about coding is that you spend a lot of time, when you're at writing like C++ or HLSL, you spend a lot of time just looking at text, and you're not actually compiling the code and actually seeing the visual result. I'm more of a visual person, so for me it's important to see the visual result. Unreal, you can kind of develop while seeing the visual result kind of at the same time, which I think is a really interesting, cool paradigm. But at the same time, you will have limitations. Because you're restricted to the nodes, if there's something you want to do that the nodes don't do, well, now you have to talk to an engineer. Whereas in Unity, if you come up with some really crazy thing and just you're reading the documentation and there's just no like kind of off the like black box way of doing it, you can write your own JavaScript function to write a new character behavior or whatever. So it's just kind of like how technical are you and how you approach your technical problem solving. You have to kind of, I would suggest kind of trying out something simple on both tools and kind of figure out where you fit in. For me, I really like Unreal because I like the visual feedback that you get while you're kind of going through your thought process. But to be honest with you, I really like the JavaScript functionality of Unity as well. So for indie games development, I've been leaning more towards Unity than Unreal. But for big games, I just, by virtue of what I do, I think I can see Unreal.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, like kind of where you go. I mean, different studios use different. Some studios can use some studios can use 3 different engines. You could literally just jump between. But at Raven, at one point, we had 3 teams. Each team was on a different technology, and you were constantly, depending on the production cycle, jumping back and forth between them. So that's where I talk about like once you have a basic general knowledge of just how the pipelines and processes, just a matter of like kind of like learning basically the semantics of how one does one versus the other. But just kind of keep that in mind that human head, like I said, Unity as well as Unreal or whatever. Yeah, keep that in mind.
Thank you. Just so we can change things up and keep you on your toes, we'll take about 3 questions pertaining to the topics that we just covered.
Hi, I was just wondering, how often do you see designers apply for jobs that don't have any programming experience at all, specifically C# or JavaScript?
So at Volition, that happens fairly often. It's actually not a huge requirement to have a programming background. Scripting is much more important, so you can do scripting in other languages. That's really more important. That's what I would look for. If you can't program, it's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with what he said. There's kind of level design and design. There's kind of those 2 tracks. Things kind of break down into the kind of visual-oriented level designer type of folks, where it's really about layout and play space and proportion and things like that. Generally, having a light programming experience, or maybe even none, is not going to be like I think an automatic disqualifier. Obviously, scripting is a bird of a different color. Actually, I will say what Human Head looks at with scripters, which is maybe a little different than other companies, is some companies with scripters, they look at them as almost like gameplay programs. They're looking at almost like 100% at their programming ability. Human Head tries to find people that are comfortable with programming that are still very much designers. And that's actually kind of hard to find, because most people that are like really into programming, they just go into gameplay programming or engine programming or something like that.
Yeah, so my experience with at Raven Activision was, just finding people that actually had some decent examples of some like gameplay design that they've done, which would mean a little bit of scripting that they would have to do. It's great to see like, you know, something on paper, like looking on paper, I've got these great design ideas on paper, and pretty much, I can pretty much say like almost everybody, you know, in the game building studio writes some really great stuff and come up with really great ideas. I think, you know, we always look for people who can actually kind of execute those ideas as well, and think outside the box of, you know, game design also in some kind of little prototype. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, I would say that in my experience, most of the designers that I've interacted with are more scripters and less software engineers, I guess. They haven't really done it a lot of like C++, API level stuff, but they have definitely done a lot of scripting. Because a lot of the game engines require scripting, like Unity. That said, I think the biggest takeaway from a student standpoint is, you know, don't use the tool for the tool's sake. Like, oh, I'm gonna make this game design with some C++. Like, if you have a really cool game design idea, and you can make it happen without writing code or whatever, the most important thing is the design idea as a designer. It's not how you got there. So that is the most important thing. So that's the number one thing. I will say that, so there's actually kind of two different tracks of design that I've seen in the larger companies I've worked at, Raven and EA specifically, is there's a designer and then there's a technical designer. And the difference between the two is a technical designer will actually work on kind of new features that the engine doesn't really support yet. And that often requires API level, you know, C++ coding. So that person has an engineering background, maybe a computer science background, something like that, and or tools development background. So he's kind of like a tools engineer and a designer combined into one head, I guess. And they are quite valuable, I will say. Like, you can find a lot of great designers, but to be honest with you, it's really, really hard to place a good technical designer, to find a good technical, someone who can actually, like, you know, open the hood and do stuff underneath. So if your strength is programming, that's certainly not a, you know, drawback.
Thank you. We'll take one more question.
Most of you have mentioned portfolios. Could you give a quick tip of some of the pitfalls, or if you were looking at somebody's portfolio, what would make you close that page and go away and not come back?
I think that, you know, some of the other guys mentioned some of the other things, like show your best work. I need to have easy access to it. I don't have a ton of time to go searching the web for different things. I really, you can get in front of me very quickly. I don't have time to install things, so like having videos is sort of the key there. I think having the videos, but then having a way to install it afterward would be great, because it's like, oh, if this is really good, then I'll take the time to do it. But for the initial set, I'm not going to. I can't spend the time to look at every level that gets sent to me.
Yeah, definitely, and certainly, you know, you should have the downloadable level there. My point earlier is it was basically that, you know, that's kind of a final step, or once you get them hooked in, then they'll perhaps take the time if they, you know, if they have the game on their computer that's based on it and so forth. But yeah, I would say a good portfolio. You know, you don't want to get too busy, but you don't want to be too bland either. You have to find a good middle ground there. If it's too busy, then they're not going to be able to find things. If it's just, you know, your name and there's a screenshot and a resume, then you're not really telling anybody anything. You know, the kind of portfolio feedback I've gotten in my job searches tended to be things like, okay, you posted this level and it looks cool, but your description of it is simply that I did this in Unreal 3 and it took me 3 months to do, and you know, that kind of thing. And you know, when you told me that, you didn't tell me what the design was. Like, you know, what cool things should I be looking for? It's important, I think, to think about what the, you know, your audience, which is you know, a level designer at a company, a lead level designer, and you want them to know what it is about your project that's awesome.
Yeah. So on that, I want to piggyback on that. So it's like, kind of like ask yourself, like, well, why do they care? You know, so if you're saying something, so if you're always writing something down in there, it's just like, yeah, it's like, here's this thing I've done in 3 months. Well, why do I care? You know, it's like, and the time that I took in 3 months, you know, is where I explained like the process in the 3 months. It was 3 months, 1 day a week, you know, whatever it was. I mean, they kind of explain like why, and because of that, I'm a very efficient worker, you know, kind of things. I always explain. But for me, as far as like, why would I stop or keep going? To me, it's, I would get just and I've looked at thousands and thousands of portfolios, and for me, it's just an initial sort of like gut reaction. Do I like it or don't I? So I would say put your best stuff up first. You know, make sure that the stuff that you're really proud about, put that in first. Like I was saying, you know, lure the person in, lure me in. So put that stuff up first, and keep in mind too that it might not always go to an artist who's reviewing you. You know, it might actually go to a recruiter, or like at Raven, we had like a hiring manager that was basically the guy that filtered all the resumes. So this is a guy with no art background at all. It was just a matter of like, I sat down with him for like a couple hours, showed him portfolios, like I would consider this a bad portfolio, I would consider this a good portfolio. A guy not trained in art at all was filtering the art coming through. And he was doing a good job. So I would kind of check back in and say, well, what are some of the stuff that you haven't kicked my way? You know, what are this, you know, I want to see those. And, you know, and he was doing a good job. So just keep in mind like just what's out there. Just make some really awesome stuff. Just know what's out there so that you're comparable to like your peers.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the #1 turnoff is just I see something that you're applying for that is just not good looking. If that happens to be your best work, well, I guess you need to improve. But the thing is, yeah, definitely put your best work #1. You're not a web designer. You don't have to make like this awesome looking website with like cool flash like buttons that fly out and stuff. That often becomes very distracting actually. Keep the website simple. It's all about professional presentation. If you want to know something about professional presentation, go to the School of Architecture and go walk around the first floor. You look at how students actually present their architectural drawings and their designs. You'll learn a little bit about typography and layout and how to do a lot more with less. That's a very good place to be if you want to know what your presentation skills should be when I'm talking about professional, polished presentation. Oftentimes in a game studio, you'll actually have to present internally, and that presentation has to be very polished and professional. You want to look professional. That's #1. I would also say that another thing is, my mind is drawing a blank. There was something else that was really important. Oh yeah, so we're not like impatient, narcissistic people. It's not like, you know, we don't want to take the time to look at your site. A lot of times we will really like pass your site around and like really dig deep into it. So don't like, you know, not put content in there because you're too afraid. I would just, like I said, put your best stuff in there and that'll open the door for more. Then everybody's going to be clicking on other things. Oh, look, check out this has like shader, you know, tab here. It's got some really cool shaders or whatever. We'll dig deeper because your site will be passed around once it's like sort of past the recruiter. And speaking of the recruiter, yeah, he's right. Recruiters actually generally don't have an art background, but they are the first person to kind of see your portfolio. But they do have eyes. So even if you're a programmer, you know, like it's kind of like people have a natural sense of what's beautiful and what's not. So even if you're like a designer or programmer, you have a website that maybe is not very art-centric, but more designer programming-centric. If it's, like I said, if it's presented well, it's definitely just going to leave an impression with somebody. And then the third thing is, if you have a very, let's just be realistic. I think a lot of, for me personally, I had some very specific companies out of school that I wanted to work for, like that was my dream. And I researched those companies and I saw what they were looking for, whether it was lighting or characters. the company that I really wanted to work for at the time was Asylum. They were doing some really cool stuff on movies, and they had a need for a lighting technical director that had experience with Renderman, and they were doing a lot of environments. So I said, you know what, I'm going to find, or if I don't have something in my portfolio that has a really, really cool environment, I'm going to make one and put that as my first piece, and that's what I'm going to apply to the company with. And you know, I got the job. My
You
friend,
have to build your portfolio at all times.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. In fact, prior to that, I had all this I wrote like this cloth simulation system as my intro to OpenGL course at WM, and I had all these like cool techie things, but I didn't really have like a really beautiful art piece. And even though I was a computer science major, and I really wanted to do this, so I just crammed for an entire summer, learned lighting, and that was a huge experience for me. I just took a 180 and just put that thing first in my portfolio. And surprisingly, when I got the job, I said, hey, what was the thing that you're most impressed with? And they said, we love that environment that you live. It's like amazing to like go on to the movie. Like you knew right then that you could definitely flourish in this company. That your coding skills and everything was a huge plus, but that is what I for. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and another example is that one of my friends, he really wanted to work at Blizzard as a cinematics artist. So he modeled one of the Mariners from StarCraft, and he put that, and it was an awesome model with textures, and he basically looked at the quality of the stuff that Blizzard comes out with, and their characters, and he basically just replicated it, and even like made it a little bit better, added his own kind of spin to it, not necessarily copying, but more using it as an inspiration, and got the job. So yeah, sometimes like just really being passionate about the kind of company you want to work for, and just kind of tailoring your work for that. Might get you in the door to that company, and at the worst, if it doesn't, you still have like really awesome work that you can now pass around to other people.
Yeah, so keep in mind too, so when we're hiring entry-level positions, it's really for one reason, cost. We're trying to keep a cost factor. If you're paying, you kind of have like your budget on your game. And when it comes time to like look at so the resources on your project and how you want to hire for your project, you literally sit down, and look at the budget and say like, okay, I need 3 artists, and here's the 3 I need, and you kind of look at the budget, you're like, well, you can't afford 3 senior artists. It's like, and there's more money to just have 3 entry level. So it's like, so keep in mind that there's definitely a cost factor involved. We know that we're hiring an entry level position because that's what we can afford the position. So we know that the stuff's not going to be professional. It's not going to be as good as some of the junior or senior level stuff. But the other biggest thing we're really looking forward to, and kind of goes to your question, is the potential for you to get better. Because we're hiring personality, we're hiring skill, and the potential that you're going to get better. So I might look at somebody's work and see like really awesome stuff, but it's like, have they hit their peak? Is it really good? I want to see a little bit. Sometimes I'll even request this when I like after a phone interview or something. I'll request that they send something from a year ago or 2 years ago, because I want to see what was the growth between those 2 years, and then do they have potential to grow more. So that's why I said like put that good stuff up first, and then having those little explanations are good. Like you can say like, hey, this was a piece I did in my first year, kind of like as my first semester, first year. As an example of my growth as an artist, my growth as a designer, or whatever. Just always good to kind of always have that little like relative thing in there, kind of balance you off of.
All right. We'll kind of truncate the list here. And we'll go to, here's a good question. Should I go to a school for game development, or should I get a traditional degree?
For design, I would have said get a traditional degree, but now there are so many options for actual game design courses, and they're getting better. They're not where I necessarily am super excited whenever I see somebody in those programs, but they're definitely more of a step up from what they used to be. We have a lot of people from wholesale, and they have really good technical background, and they teach them quite a lot. Guildhall is another big place to go as well. But there are a lot more options. So if game design is really what you want to do, I would definitely recommend looking at a game design program and seeing what you can get out of it.